Okay, I'd just like to answer some general stuff on doing spiritual work, and there's different phases one can go through when doing spiritual work. As you start to do spiritual work, especially something like the Course in Miracles, where you start to see everybody as sinless and you start to forgive everyone, often spiritual seekers will report glimpses where everything is stunningly beautiful, the intrinsic nature and divine nature of everyone is revealed, and everything is witnessed to be stunningly beautiful. And so they go into these, jump into these exquisite spiritual states where it's like divine revelation. Well, I remember after seeing Muji, I was in a tube, and it wasn't like me, there was just witnessing happening in a tube. But it was witnessed that everyone on the carriage was so exquisitely beautiful that there were tears. It was just too beautiful, and there were just tears streaming down. The revelation of the beauty of everything was revealed without that filtering. It was overwhelming. So those types of glimpses, or near those glimpses, can be done. Now, what tends to happen is as one comes down from those experiences, the ego can take hold of them in various ways, you see. So the ego then ascribes a dualistic relationship to those things, or projects that the people are the source of those experiences and wants to be in relationship to them. Plus, as you do spiritual work, you're letting go of all your belief systems. You know, your belief systems around relationships, around what's right and wrong in relationships, you see, and the intrinsic lovability. But there's often some ego still left in there, which will then put a slant on everything. You see, it can suddenly seem like one is madly in love with a person, and that's because the ego hasn't been fully released yet, and it can create kind of a special love, like the love is going to come from that person, and one needs to have that person, or control that person, or own that person, or influence that person. So that's like one is starting to do spiritual work, but then there's remnants of the ego, and it attaches meaning to different people, and there can be like definitely one does start to see, this can happen. Sometimes one looks at a person and their stunning beauty is revealed, it's immense. But then one comes back a bit into the ego, and then one ascribes it that one needs to have that person, you see. Or because one has seen their absolute beauty in that person. So one can get infatuated or think about that person, or just want to spend time with that person, or even try and control that person to make sure they spend time, or have a romantic relationship with that person. All these things can arise. But that's because of the ego filtering. There's still some ego filtering going on, even though one is getting glimpses of the divine nature. And actually in the divine nature everything is equally stunningly beautiful. Everything. And that is revealed. But you start to get glimpses of it, and you might get it with humans, and there could be an attachment forming, or what's called a special or meaningful dualistic relationship with that person. So that happens. Now, when you do spiritual work, there is a phase, and it was a very good question I was asked. There is a phase of this is what I was discussing here, a phase of what I call spiritual immaturity, where everything is seen with love, but it's like what hasn't yet developed into the ripeness of full spiritual maturity and intuition. I mean, and it can lead to serious problems, so it's really important. It's like you want to save everybody, or everyone is seen to be innocent and equally lovable, which also happens in the beginning, which is something that spiritual seekers need to know is a phase, which they need to be cautious about. Because obviously if you've got if you see if you see a bank robber who you've seen in the newspaper the day before, and you suddenly see them, and this is quite new to you, they'll seem absolutely lovable and innocent and trustworthy. So, if they said to you, look, I'm out of money, can you just give me all your credit cards and everything, and I'll give them back to you tomorrow, you'd probably do it. See? So that's not quite, you're not yet spiritually matured enough to do it. Or you might get mistaken with infatuations as well. So that sense of spiritual maturity and wisdom and discernment, which comes from a rightness, even though everything is equally lovable, it's not that naivety has gone later on, you see. So that can happen, and that can lead to infatuations with an individual. Now, in terms of okay, let me carry on with the relationship bit. There's different phases you go through spiritual work, and so there's spiritual naivety, and you're always letting go. And whenever you let go, there will always be a fear if you let more go. So, I'm quite happy now, but if I let go any more, then I'll never have a relationship. I won't be able to work. I won't be able to function. I'll be just blissed out on a mountaintop, and that's it for me, So, I do like letting go and doing spiritual, but that I don't want that. I'm not prepared to let that one go. I don't want to look like a hippie on a mountain. What will my mother think of me? What about my street cred? So all kinds of questions can arise, and these are very common in the spiritual seeker. For each level, there is fear, and there are outcomes which seem to be like, and these are quite common. I'll never have a romantic relationship, I won't be able to function, I won't earn any money, I'll die. It'll actually be all a big mistake to let it go. And that's quite normal. And then you'll probably see some spiritual teachers who tell you that, they went off into a mountain for 3 years before they came back, which probably doesn't help it. And they were forced to come back because people wanted them back in the world. So you might come across those, or people who might go and live in a park after a spiritual experience and just be blissed out on a park bench for years. So you go, well, I'll do some spiritual work, but I need to have a romantic relationship, I need to work. I don't want to be sitting on a park bench blissed out for 3 years. So the fears come in. Which, so I'll describe it. Many enlightened teachers have relationships. I wouldn't say they were having special relationships, but it looks like they're having a special relationship. They have relationships based on love with the opposite sex. So that does happen with enlightened teachers, and they seemingly have relationships with their children and with spiritual seekers, so that carries on. So that's a possibility as well. Now, with the thing of doing spiritual work is you don't have to let go any more than you're willing to. And actually, when you let go of something to God, to the universe, you are if you fully let it go, you're allowing whatever happens to be in the ordinance of divine will. You see, so you're basically saying, my personal will won't have a matter in it, say in it. Whatever happens is up to divine will. So that brings up a lot of fear, you see, and so these blocks arise. The blocks arise. Well, I'm not going to give up any more because I won't have a relationship. I'm not willing to give up any more because I have to pay the rent. Other more subtle ones can come up. What will my parents and all my friends think of me? If I sit in a park bench for the next year, they're going to think I've gone downhill. I've become a drunk or something, with a big smile on my face every day. so that's too much, We've got to hold on to a little bit of fear and control, and so that you can go on the dating apps and make sure you can function at work. word comes in, you know. So these are normal. These are actually very, very normal things that many people come in. Now, I'm going to give my answer. I mean, I sometimes give answers on different levels. On different levels, you know, on a practical level, you know, if you're in a relationship, you want to get into a relationship, I mean, you're only going to work at the level of consciousness you're at and your perceptions of what the world is and what your fears are. So, you know, doing stuff like forgiveness work or things is going to clear a lot of stuff, even if if you want to get into a relationship. Even doing the work in why you want to get into a relationship and why you're not willing to let that go, you know. If you're willing, you don't have to do any work if you don't want to do it. You can hold on to everything. What I would say is that there are techniques of being in relationships and being quite grounded, and by doing forgiveness work or self-inquiry or stuff, and you carry on, or you can do forgiveness work or self-inquiry or the Course in Miracles at work and carry on in your job. I mean, at certain levels, if you fully want to let something go, then you have to accept that it's up to divine will, what happens with your life after that. Now, it is true, and I understand a lot of spiritual seekers have this fear when they see advanced spiritual teachers. Because often they'll have a spell where they might be on a mountain for 3 years, or they might be on a park bench, blissed out for a period of time. Or, you know, like in Hawkins' case, he went into the desert in a cabin on his own, just to spend time in solitary thing. Because when you let go, sometimes you'll go into these enormous states of bliss and joy and ecstaticness. And actually there's no desire to interface in the world in the way that one used to. Or often there may be an adjustment phase where one needs to take some time out to adjust to the much higher level of consciousness and integrate that into what one is before one comes back in. So those things can also potentially happen as well. Of course, if you're blissed out, you know, you don't really care about paying the rent. And actually, if you look at those people, the universe takes care of them. Absolutely everything they need is provided by the universe directly. You know, so those things are potentialities to happen. So it does bring up fear. It does bring up a lot of fear, and it's like, I'm not going to let go if I'm going to be blissed out for 2 years' time, just endlessly happy with a smile on my face. I must have a relationship, and I must pay my bills, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't. I mean, it's like God doesn't force anything. Everything is by free will, if you like. So if you want to let it go, but that is the ultimate meaning of surrender. The ultimate is to surrender is the small self's will in the matter of how it will be in the future, and surrendering to divine will, having a better plan. And sometimes the small will must make sure the plan looks this way. You know, well, I'll surrender as long as I'm earning lots of money and I'm married to George Clooney, you see. So it's like, but if it means that might not happen, I'm not willing to surrender, which is also okay as well. So that's also okay. But actually often, you know, not often, I mean some I'm talking about advanced states of consciousness. Some of them are single and some of them are not. You know, some of them are in relationships. The divine state doesn't stop a romantic, well, it's not a special relationship, but it's seemingly romantic, faithful relationship, and doesn't stop with the relationship with the kids going on. It doesn't stop that. But if there is, let's put it this way, which might be a downer, it won't be a desire. It won't come from a place of lack and striving, that those things have to be conditional on, and there's an experiencing of lack whether those things happen or not, will not happen in the divine state. So they seem to happen effortlessly of themselves, like it just seems to be happening, Some of them may have relationships, some of them may not. Some of them may teach, some of them may be alone. But that's in accordance with divine will. So the ego, often with the ego, it's holding on to things with fear and lack and need, and if it lets go, it's going to be deprived. Well, the divine state is not a deprived state. It'll never be a deprived state. But then the ego, in fear and limitation, goes, it must look this way if I let go. Because actually I will be deprived unless I get a relationship with George Clooney and have a Michael Kors handbag. Michael Kors handbags, I watch those in the tube. And I count them, I see them every day. Michael Kors handbag, George Clooney, and also that I can pay my bills. Well, actually, the stories of the enlightened teachers are really interesting in terms of, all their needs being met. If you ever look at the stories, you'll see that all their needs are met by the divine. Maybe not necessarily through a job, but the divine always takes care of them if the divine needs to. Or sometimes the divine, like Hawkins said, this is quite funny. Like, if you're blissed out, the divine gives you a wife, and the wife looks after you. That's what happened with Hawkins, So he was kind of blissed out. But still, the divine, he got a partner. And she did a lot of she does a lot of the practical functioning aspects for him, like drive him to the lectures and put the lecture slides on and tell him that it's now time we have to stop for their lunch break. So he's got this thing, and so the divine is using him at that level of just blissed out light. But it's still but it's not like, he has to keep down his 9-to-5 job. And yeah, he has got a relationship, but it's not like, that just came out of the divine, you see. And there was some kind of higher purpose for him to teach. And so the divine provided food, accommodation, a partner, everything that was required for him to fulfill the divine function. So that's so maybe not the answer that one wanted to hear on that with relationship. At the ultimate level, in terms of yes, one can have a relationship, a faithful relationship with another in the divine, but the one is present and one doesn't imbue specialness. One is not in a state of lack and neediness around another person. And in fact, if that other person said, look, I need to leave for something else and go off and do something else, they would be fine as well, you see, because it's just pure love. It's not like neediness and attachment. Neediness, attachment and lack, which are the usual things of an ego-special relationship, where there's fear of loss, there's need to control, there's feeling of sorrow and lack if they're enjoying themselves doing something else, or jealousy. None of that exists, you see. All of that is transcended. In terms of work, one can still do spiritual, one can do a lot of spiritual work while at work. Like if you can, there's two things I would do if I was in a job. One is practice neutral observing and doing one's function, so one doesn't get emotionally hooked to what's going on, to characters and people and situations. So when you're more in a spiritual place, there's anything anybody can do or say that will take you off balance. It's okay, it's like you'll be doing well. Like even if the boss came and said you're fired, you'd say, oh thanks, okay, well I'll leave now, and you're still happy. If you're okay with that, then you've probably transcended all fear in the workplace, because you're not imbuing your trust on what's happening in the work or the specifics of the situation, or just forgiving, you see. And you'll see, often as you do spiritual work, a lot of people get promoted, a lot of people get given more responsibility. So just as you jump up, your capacity to deal with people and not to be fazed by whatever goes on with people's traumas and dramas. It gets better. So often you get promoted, actually. But sometimes as you do more advanced spiritual work, your attraction for that environment may leave. You know, like if your role is being an accountant for McDonald's, not that I've got anything against accountants in McDonald's, as you get more in tune with your divine nature, it may not feel intuitively correct to carry, even though they might promote you to the highest level, like you're head of the accountancy. They still, you may start at a certain point, get a divine intuition, no longer there is that, it's not the appropriate environment for you to be in. So these things, but the ego then can go, well, if I won't let go anymore because I'll start to lose my need to be an accountant at McDonald's. So I'll just hold on a bit more because otherwise I might not even hang around in this job. I might leave. Yeah. So those things, which is okay. You could just stay and live the rest of your life as an accountant in McDonald's, which is also fine.